What happens when you put it into a 3-year-old child's head that everyone is separate, that everything is material and that there is nothing else beyond that? The child grows up and thinks that he or she is free, alone. He or she becomes a victim, believing in all those stories that explain the universe by saying that everything is separate, that there is no unification. That's how wars are accepted. If people don't see that everything is connected, they accept the idea of shooting at each other. The other is separate, I have nothing to do with him, I can do whatever I want with him, and it doesn't affect me in the least. War is subject to this philosophy of classical physics, everyone is separate. But reality is reality. You can understand it however you want, think that it is possible to live according to Newton's theory, but there will be consequences. Why? Because you are subject to a system that has strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism and gravity. These are the 4 forces that govern the universe. There is no escape from this. You can do whatever you want, but it becomes somatized. You can be sure that traumas will come, neuroses, psychoses, illnesses, bankruptcies, etc. All of this tragedy that we see in the world occurs because we believe that everything is separate. Human beings believe everything that is said to them. This is called credibility. A little child will believe everything they are told, right? The father, the mother, the uncle, the grandfather, the school, the media, everyone imposes concepts, truths, all the time. The most practical way to put something in someone's head is to tell a story, a metaphor, an analogy, a parable. All of these stories are either catastrophic or very benevolent. Depending on what the child has heard, their actions will be, however absurd they may be, like those we see around the world. How can a person put on a bomb belt, press a button and kill 200? And think that they are right? It is a belief. And we, in the West, also have similar beliefs. 1,000 years ago, didn't we in the West go on crusade? The day the Crusaders arrived in Jerusalem, there were 40,000 people in a religious meeting in a mosque, and they were all killed. Women, children, old people, everyone. The Crusaders killed all 40,000. That's how it started, 1,000 years ago. And for 1,000 years, there have been retaliations. When it is explained that everything is an atom, and people talk about an atomic bomb, which is something tangible, perceptible, it is easy to understand, isn't it? If it is possible to see it, touch it, photograph it, everyone accepts it without any problems. Energy is the same as mass, it makes no difference whether you use mass or energy, whether you throw an atomic bomb or throw a plutonium ball at your head, right? But people start to doubt when you start working on something abstract, real, but more abstract, not visible, although everyone accepts going to the hospital to have a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan, to have an X-ray, to use a cell phone. Understanding becomes more complicated as we draw one conclusion, which leads to another, and so on, because it is a logic, because that is how physics evolves. People stop and think, this must lead to this, and this, therefore, this must exist here. For example, the neutrino. It was discovered, mathematically, about 20 years ago, if I am not mistaken, before it was detected in a laboratory. Mathematics said, there must be a particle called a neutrino. Since mathematics is believed, and it was logically deduced that the particle existed, people began to look for it. All antiparticles were also discovered in this way. There must be an antiparticle. So, the antiproton, the antielectron, the anti. They looked for it and found it. That was how the concept of matter and antimatter was created, which is another issue, because in theory our universe could not exist. When matter and antimatter collide, they are just names, right? The proton is positive, the antiproton is negative, the charges collide, the two add together. Where? In the quantum vacuum. Theoretically, when the Big Bang occurred, this entire universe could not exist. Because what we see here is a remnant of matter. How could all the matter that was created not be cancelled out by antimatter? That is what should have happened, because each particle has its antiparticle. Mathematically, nothing should exist. And how does it exist? It is obvious that there must be someone who collapsed a wave function, keeping X% of matter from collapsing. That is why the universe exists. But you will not find this conclusion in a physics book. It will be written, it should be, this should be cancelled, we do not know how. Period. You turn the page, change the subject, do you understand? Whenever something comes up that makes you think, and what is the next conclusion? You change the subject, because it will change the paradigm. And you cannot change the paradigm, because all interests are based on maintaining the status quo, or on maintaining this Newtonian paradigm. That is why you cannot understand quantum mechanics. You can use it as you please, cell phone, iPod, missile, satellite, GPS, you just cannot understand it. Because, understanding it, one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, and this turns into power. That is how it happens, in the workplace. If everything is information, and if, even falling into a black hole, information persists, then it is available and never disappears. If everything that has been thought or felt is available without any limit of time or space, imagine the progress that will occur on this planet when this concept is understood and accepted. But this will take a long time. Except for those who use the harmonic resonance tool, those who are part of this extreme minority that can accept this concept, that information is available to everyone, all they need to do is want it. Everything is a wave, everything is a particle, so any manual can also be treated as a wave. Think of a manager of a women's shoe store in a shopping mall, whose knowledge already exists as a wave. If this manager comes here and gives a class on how to manage a shoe store, what will you capture? Electromagnetic waves. But the knowledge will be limited, because no matter how much he talks, you will capture his mind. It is like reading a book with 200 biographies about a person X. How much access will you have to this person? Just your mind, right? Psychologists can even dissect how this guy thought, so that you can benefit from his knowledge. But that's all, a little bit of the mind. However, all the emotional is also there, untouched. If you only have the mind, can you duplicate the person's results? If you study a great businessman, a great scientist, a great representative of any field, will you be able to duplicate his skills? No. Because you don't know exactly what information is there. It's someone else's vision writing about it. Everything mental about the mind. The manager's emotional is not available in your class. But if you receive all the mental knowledge, as well as the emotional knowledge of a shoe store manager, what happens? The next time you go to the mall, you will no longer look at a shoe store as a consumer. You will be the manager of a women's shoe store. So, you will look at the types of shoes, the salespeople, the organization, the service and everything else, like an expert, like an excellent shoe store manager. In the world of MP3, MP4, MP10, where you can record 20,000 songs on an iPod, 64 gigabytes of information on a tiny device, what's so difficult about understanding that all information can be compressed? Do you see? No one will have access to this information written in Word. To want this is to reason in Newton's paradigm, everything is separate, everything is matter. This path will lead nowhere. But they are trying to do it. Put some electrodes in a person's brain and pass word inside. You laugh because you already understand the concept. But whoever is trying to do this needs a conceptual leap, a paradigm shift, to understand that it makes no sense to want to transmit a Word document in this way. That's not how it works. Once you have the knowledge of that subject, you can transmit the entire wave to the brain. The knowledge is absorbed instantly, like a wave. Why this neurosis of treating everything as a particle, as mass? I've already explained that whoever understands knowledge as a wave will have enormous power. But you keep trying to make things stand up, with this kind of old-fashioned approach that you don't see in science fiction anymore. If you watch science fiction movies, you'll see that everything is treated as a wave. TV series producers and fiction writers have already understood that everything is a wave, that there's no point in trying to transfer knowledge in terms of mass, of chemistry. But in general, it takes a while for the penny to drop. In our case, all information can be accessed and transferred to whoever you want. Everything in the universe is an address. Street, number, city, apartment, floor, everything is an address. Width, length, height. And in spacetime? Even in Einstein's spacetime, it is also an address. When a rocket is launched to Mars, Earth is here, Mars is here. Represents each planet with one hand, one of them a little above the other and more to the right. NASA launches a rocket. Does it launch it like this? Makes a straight line upwards in the air with his right hand. No, obviously not. It launches it here, draws a line downwards in the air. It launches the rocket to the future address. Do you remember the coach of the Brazilian national team who wanted the player to think about the future point? It was difficult to think about that, to put the ball in the future point, not where the player was at that moment, but where he would be next. With the rocket, the reasoning is the same. The rocket is launched to the future point of Mars, as to an address. And it gets there with a difference of just a few meters, with a small margin of error, even if the time is long. So, is spacetime also an address? Yes. Do you see? There is no such thing as impossible in quantum mechanics. There are infinite possibilities. If you don't believe it, it's not possible. If you believe it, it is possible. It's an open system. Everything can be built, because nothing is fundamental. The only fundamental thing is the quantum vacuum. And from it, either a string comes out, which can vibrate in any way you want, if you have the knowledge to do so, or the Higgs boson comes out, or anything, and you can build as many little bricks as you want. More than 200 subparticles have already been discovered, it just depends on expanding the paradigm. Everything you think is possible, will be possible. It's your mind that limits how far you can go. Any information is available. The universe is built in an extremely complex way, because it was created by a mind capable of collapsing the wave function of a Big Bang, and not letting all matter disappear, and still creating and maintaining a structure of this type. Take the Higgs boson as an example. If it vibrates in another way, there will be 6 types of quarks, each vibrating in a different way. Putting 3 of them together, you have a proton, and so on. Did you notice? Going back to the origin, to the quantum vacuum, with whatever emerges from there, you can build the little bricks and the organization you want, because it is a system within a system, that's all. There are n systems, one within the other, several levels of organization, each with its own laws. That's why people say, no, there are the laws of psychology, biology, social and economic laws, etc. Why? Each level of organization has its own laws, but down there, ultimately, there is the quantum vacuum. It is from there that everything emerges. So, if you understand this, can't you manipulate everything upwards? If you understand the initial brick, you can manipulate it. If you can move the foundation of the building, making it stronger or weaker, you can raise 5 floors, 10, 20, 100 floors, it depends on how much you can manipulate the foundation. It's the same thing in life. Once you understand this issue, which is why physics is the mother of all sciences, you can manipulate economics, sociology, manipulate anything you want. Everything can be shaped, manifested, changed. The mind creates the person's own reality. Do you remember all the experiments we mentioned? However, if the person doesn't believe, he or she doesn't manifest, or manifests everything incorrectly. Either way, the person is under, or inside, an organism that functions according to its own laws, and not according to the person's laws. There is an ultimate reality. But this ultimate reality is open. You can create whatever you want, because, ultimately, you are exchanging information. And when you exchange information, everyone wins, grows, and adds value. Since all of this can be done, wouldn't it be normal for there to be something called an archetype? What is an archetype? It is the blueprint for each existing thing. Before something can exist, it needs to be thought out. This thought is the prototype, it is the archetype of what will exist, it is the perfect idea. The rest are attempts to reach the objective. So, there is perfection and then the lower levels, moving towards reaching the archetype, which is the perfect one. We all experience some archetype, and this guides the person's life in a certain way. Is the archetype information? Everything that exists in the universe is pure information. It can be treated as mass, but it is information. We can take its DNA, pointing to a person in the audience, and burn it to a CD. With 800 megabytes, we have its DNA recorded on a disk. Can't we take this disk somewhere else and duplicate it? Why is it necessary to treat it as a cell, the way it is done today? Is it necessary to stick the needle into the nucleus of the cell to make the copy, the cloning, as was done with Dolly? This is a Newtonian, biomolecular view. Cloning is being treated as biomolecular. But we can treat it only as information. It is possible to transfer information from one being to an egg via laser, change all the information that already exists in it, and give birth to another type of being. This has already been done. Is it science fiction? No. Information is transferred via laser. What is a laser? A bunch of photons, one after the other, right? Light. Another, right? Light. Do you remember the explanations about electromagnetic fields, intrinsic information, etc.? Everything there can be modified, with a laser. Person X has his information, but it is possible to channel it, to put other information, radio, television. There is no need to clone him, points to the audience, by means of a molecule, cell, egg, sperm. You put his information on a CD, and transfer it wherever you want. Did you notice? It is pure information. And in relation to his wave? The same thing happens. Do we need the disk, the CD, with his DNA? No, just think about it, this leads to that, which leads to that other thing, and it keeps expanding. There is no need to get the CD with his DNA, or a test tube, or anything. We just need his wave, which has all his information, and it is there, available. Who wants it? Everything in the universe is available. The universe is a truly democratic place. Why? Because everything is interconnected, everything you do comes back to you. This ensures that no one will use this availability negatively. So, once you understand the concept, you can start to have access to information. Why is all this quantum mechanics used to make an atomic bomb and not for the other uses we are discussing? Because they did not understand the concept. They understood one thing, but they still need to understand another. Do you see? It is necessary to take the leap, to understand that you do not need an atomic bomb, you need to understand the meaning of everything else that was said. Otherwise, you will not be able to do it. There comes a time when you realize that the system is self-regulating. In order to understand physics, you need to go to a certain point. At a certain point of intelligence, you understand that with physics it is possible to make an atomic bomb. That is where humanity is. It is thought that everyone is separate, so you can drop the atomic bomb on someone else. But to go up a little more level, still talking about weaponry, what is necessary? You need to understand a more advanced physics, which goes beyond what is normally known, and which is called metaphysics. You need to understand more, otherwise you will not be able to manipulate the forces. At this point, the person is forced to understand how the whole works, and then they don't throw bombs at anyone anymore. The system is self-sustaining. At a certain point, it is necessary to have such a high level of knowledge that the person is forced to understand the whole. Otherwise, they cannot use metaphysics as a weapon. They can use it to kill a person, to cause cancer, but not on a large scale. To have a large-scale reach, they need to understand a lot about metaphysics. And to do this, they need to have such an expansion of consciousness that they begin to understand the whole, and finally understand that everything they send out comes back. They have to be very insane to keep sending out, knowing that it will come back, sooner or later. And it will come back. This enters another area, which is the following: if someone affects the interests of the whole too much, the system itself makes an adjustment. They have to understand that there is an owner, as when they see the sign, under new management. There is someone who collapses the wave function of the Big Bang. This intelligence manages everything. Let people play, like the teacher who lets 300 little children play in the playground to their heart's content. But if a boy starts hitting others on the head with a club, the teacher intervenes, right? Stop it, it's over, and takes that boy out of the game. The same thing happens with the whole. Within the scope of free will, people can act to a certain extent, with a wide margin of action, which no one will restrict. They can start a second world war, in which 60 million people die. The margin is wide, isn't it? A person can become a billionaire, they can have 50 billion, as many do. Free will is very vast, both on one side and on the other. But there is always a limit that, if exceeded, will upset the cosmic balance. In this case, the person is relocated, sooner or later, anyway, by the intrinsic laws of the universe. Every time something negative is done, antimatter is attracted, which adheres. That is why people become negative, environments become negative, etc. Do you understand? A negative polarization occurs. The universe is built of matter. Antimatter will create distortions. If too much antimatter sticks to your liver, the person will start to have liver problems. And this has a limit too. The person will accumulate so much antimatter that they will start to have problems of all kinds. But this is a subject for another lecture. It is not possible to go into too much detail on each item. Anyway, this is how it works: negative things accumulate antimatter. But guess what? What dissolves antimatter? Light. When light hits, in 122 billionths of a second, bang, the antimatter disappears. That's why there's that theological concept about darkness not being able to withstand light. When light hits, it dissolves darkness, antimatter, anti-light. When the photon, it's a real photon, just like the one in a light bulb, hits the antimatter, it dissolves it. And then, it cleanses it. What do you call this in psychology? Catharsis. I'm explaining this so you can understand what happens when you use the harmonic resonance tool. People ask for a series of things when they come for an interview. The wave carries all the information people want. Cannon's manual, the Guarantee Fund manual, a book about a public exam, and so on. There are N requests, like the one from the guy who goes to Goya's and wants to be a specialist in fishing for tuna. Everything you can imagine is requested. And there is information for everything. Everything is provided, and it gives results. But what happens? People have free will, they have a brain that thinks. If they are thinking, even a little bit, out of touch with reality, what happens? Remembering everything I said about experiments, whoever is manifesting something problematic needs to adjust their way of thinking to reality. Remember what I said about taboos, traumas, prejudices, comfort zones, paradigms, self-sabotage. Until they adjust all of this, how will they get the massive result they want? It is literally impossible. But most people don't understand. When I say, it will take at least 6 months, it is because there is a physical, biochemical, cellular, neuron protocol for the information to enter as a wave and organize itself until it becomes a neuron, to become behavior. Imagine, what you asked for is a wave that collides with your wave. When it enters, it is assimilated at the deepest level. Then, it needs to be organized, assimilated, to become behavior, to become a worldview, an emanation. On the other hand, imagine if, in your unconscious, there is a trauma that prevents you from forgiving so-and-so, and you emanate it, without stopping. How can you get what you want, be it a person, a car, a house, an apartment, business, travel, salary, job, etc., if the radio station is sending something negative? Obviously, it is necessary to clean this, and everything else that is, under the carpet, as they say. At first, after a month or two, the person came and everything is being cleaned up, but it is thanks to the wave that came in with such force. The person borrowed, let's say, an extremely positive wave, and assimilated it. But he continues to emanate a negative wave, where his traumas, blockages, taboos, prejudices, comfort zone, self-sabotage, paradigm are. This is how he is generating illness, unemployment, lack of clients, junk, etc. Do you remember the Zeno effect? And the collapse of the wave function? People do this all the time, and keep sending out the negative wave. But, in the first month everything went well, a positive wave came in, very strong, and promoted many events. Sometimes the day after coming, just yesterday, a person said that the day after he came here for the first time, he got a job, some receive court orders, others buy a new car, are promoted, and so on. When this happens in the first month, it is on loan. The wave that has joined the persons is so strong, so benevolent, that it attracts good things to itself. The person becomes happy, receives more clients, and makes more money. But they forget that they also need to clean everything that is, under the rug. And this can take a month, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, however long it takes, at the speed that the person allows.